If you're on the lookout for new construction in Dallas, there are some seriously outrageous rug pulls that happen in new construction all the time, and you need to be prepared for them. Well, hello, I'm Wendy Pennell, and you're not gonna believe this first example I'm going to tell you. All right, so here's the situation. You, the buyer, have been shopping for homes with us for like what seems like forever, right? You're taking your time because of course you wanna buy smart, but it finally happens. We all do our research, run all the numbers, we negotiate prices with the builders until we come to an agreement. Next, we review the contract with you, make sure everything looks good, and finally you sign the contract. In fact, not only do you sign the contract, but you put down a hefty deposit, okay? We're talking like maybe 30 to 40,000 sometimes. So they've taken your money, like literally the money is withdrawn from your account, okay? It's gone. I mean, that's got to mean we're moving forward, right? It must be time to celebrate because after a long and grueling process, at last, we're under contract, right? Well, wrong, because here's our first rug pull. You're still not under contract. It could be as much as 1 to 2 weeks later, you find out the builders like another buyer's offer more than yours. I mean, maybe the builders will give you the chance to match the other buyer's terms, but at the end of the day, you thought you were under contract, but you're not, okay? So how is this even possible? Well, it turns out that every party didn't actually sign the contract. You know, just because you signed and because they took your deposit doesn't mean your contract is actually executed. You see, the sales consultant at the local level has no binding authority, right? She'll tell you what the manager says they'll accept, but since it's only verbal, it isn't binding. And here's the other side to it. There's more than one sales consultant in the community. So while you've been negotiating and signing contracts with one sales consultant, the other sales consultant has been doing the same thing with a different buyer. I mean, sure, it shouldn't happen, but it does. And since nothing the sales consultant told you is binding, even though you've signed, you still don't have a right to that home. The contract has to be signed by upper levels of management for it to be executed. And unfortunately, like sometimes that can take up to a week or longer. We recently had this happen on a new build where they came back a week later, said they had a buyer, and if our client still wanted the house, our client would have to give up a part of the money we had negotiated for them. With pre-owned homes, you would never get away with taking someone's money for a deposit, holding on to it, and then later telling them you won't agree to the original terms. I mean, this is part of the reason it's beneficial to have a realtor, but sometimes even with the realtor pushing, okay, which is what we did, the sales consultant will stall and delay. We once had a D.R. Horton sale where it took 2 weeks for us to get the contract back and actually signed by the builder. And that's 2 weeks of our buyer not having access to his money and not knowing if he was actually under contract on the home or not. And again, you would never get away with this with a pre-owned home, but if the new construction arena, okay, in that arena, it happens, and you need to be aware of that. Moving on, because like it or not, that's not the only new construction rug pull you need to be prepared for. The next example is the developer rug pull, okay? And here's the scenario you want to watch out for with this one. So again, you shop, you negotiate, you analyze, all right? You pick a new build, you pick the lot, and you begin to realize this process, okay, it can take weeks. Heck, it can even take months to find just the right one. So we negotiate with the sales consultant, we come to an agreement, right? Finally, it feels like you can take a breath, right, and relax. But at the very last minute, the sale falls through when the builder tells you the driveway can't go on the right side of the house or the left, okay, that the footprint of the house has to be flipped. So you invested an enormous amount of time just to find this out at the last minute. We had this happen with one of our buyers who had settled on a gorgeous lot with views of a green belt on both the back and the left side of the house. And at the last minute, right, with the contract literally in front of us, the sales consultant waited until then to tell us the side of the house that doesn't have any windows has to face the direction with the beautiful green belt, right? So here's what you need to know. Just because the community may have houses all along the very same street facing in one direction doesn't mean that yours can face that direction as well. And I'm sure you're wondering, right, why this would even happen. And it has to do with easements, utilities, and developer rules. okay? The kinds of things that you don't normally talk about with the sales consultant because one, they've either, forgotten these factors until the last minute or two, or they honestly didn't even know about them from the beginning. We recently had a separate sale where we were told what the orientation was, money had already changed hands, and we were in fact under contract, only to find out the driveway and home had to change sides because the sales consultant was told wrong. So sometimes it's not even the consultant's fault. The developers just don't always share all of the information. So here's the lesson. When you're considering a new build, always ask. I found this to be the one thing sales consultants will forget to tell you, or they'll flat out tell you wrong. Okay, now not intentionally, of course, but just because they've been given bad information themselves. You have to remember that this isn't so much a builder rule as it is a developer rule. So you're talking about multiple levels that you have to work through to ensure you have the right answer. And that's multiple levels of communication that can easily end up being misunderstood by the time it makes it to you. So again, always ask and ask a lot. Okay, next up, let's talk about the rate lock rug pull. In order to really understand this one, you need to know what a rate lock is first. Okay, David McMillan with Bankrate explains it this way. A rate lock is a guarantee that a mortgage lender will honor a specific interest rate at a specific cost for a set period. Now, why is this something you want? Well, NerdWallet explains the benefits this way. Once locked, the loan's interest rate won't change no matter what's happening with the economy. Sounds great, right? You want to know how much your monthly payment will cost you in the future so you can plan for it. But here's where the rug pull comes into play, and NerdWallet explains it well. They say you're protected from higher rates, but you won't get a lower rate either. Gina Freeman with themortgagereports.com chimes in, sharing the kind of situation you don't want to find yourself in. She says, what if you lock a mortgage and then rates fall? Unfortunately, you can't just unlock your rate to avoid paying higher interest. So let's just say you're at work and several people are talking about how interest rates just took a nosedive. You get excited thinking your monthly payment will be lower, but now you're stuck with the higher rate. Now you talk about your rug pull. I mean, here you have a credit score in the 800s and you're still having to pay a higher than market interest rate. I mean, you're getting zero benefit from your excellent credit score. Freeman comments on this. She says the agreement works both ways. If rates suddenly fall, you can't just back out of the rate lock and expect your lender to offer you a lower interest rate. In other words, you can't unlock your rate after locking. Now, there are ways to get that lower interest rate, okay? But they're gonna come with an opportunity cost. Your first option, Freeman says, is that you should always ask your lender about a float down option. A float down option is an agreement between you and your lender that can be made after you lock a rate. But guess what? You're gonna have to pay an additional cost. As Freeman says, it will usually be 0.5% to 1% of the loan amount at closing in return for getting lower current market rates. For instance, a float down provision on a $300,000 loan would likely cost around $1,500, so 0.5% of the loan amount. But she continues, sometimes the float down fee can cost as much as 1% of the new loan amount. So if you have a $600,000 mortgage, that's a $6,000 expense to take advantage of a reduced interest rate. I mean, that is quite a difference in what you thought you'd be spending at closing. So, hello rug pull. Your second option, if you've already agreed to a rate lock and then the rates end up lower than what you looked into, is you can cancel your loan application and switch lenders. You have to abandon your current lender and start the entire loan process over with a new lender that can offer you the lower market rate. Now, your cost here is your time involved in starting over. Plus, you run the risk of not being able to close on time, and you may also have costs such as having to redo an appraisal. Here's what you need to know though. As Freeman says, there are huge benefits and risks to both of these strategies. You'll either face a large float down cost or a big delay and added paperwork. So it costs money to lock a rate, and it costs money to lock a float down. Now, the rate lock rug pull will come into play whether you're buying a pre-owned home or new construction, but it's far more problematic with new construction, and here's why. It's because the closing time often takes longer and it's more uncertain. So even when you're buying an inventory home, builders are affected by things like bad weather, supply delays, and you often don't close when you think you will. So at the end of the day, you're just at a higher risk of more significant rate movement. Next up, let's talk about the convenience clause rug pull. Now this clause is actually pretty common among new construction contracts, and it is really dangerous for buyers. So let me give you a few examples of convenience clauses that we've seen firsthand in builder contracts. Paragraph 14 of Antares Homes contract states, seller may also terminate this contract for seller convenience for any or no reason at all. In the same paragraph, it states, regardless of whether such termination is accepted by buyer, buyer shall have no right to specific performance. We found a pretty similar clause in paragraph 8 of the Normandy Homes contract as well. It reads, seller may terminate this contract for any or no reason at all for seller's own convenience. It turns out we're not the only ones having issues with these kinds of clauses. Steve Noviella with Fox 4 News wrote an entire article based on the outrage of a family who were duped by a builder with a convenience clause. Okay, here's the story. A North Texas family says they have a warning for anyone who's buying a home from a builder. He explains how just days before closing on their forever home, their builder backed out. Turns out the builder's contract they were required to sign left them with virtually no protection. The Fox 4 News article quotes an attorney, Jason Friedman, on the topic who says, this is basically an agreement to hold you hostage. He continued, if you're signing a contract like this, you could be homeless. Unlike a Texas Real Estate Commission promulgated sales contract, which offers protection for both buyer and seller, Friedman says the builder contract left them vulnerable. And that's the lesson you have to learn with these builder contracts. Unlike a TREC contract on pre-owned homes, a builder contract does not have to do anything to protect you as the buyer. It's written by an attorney hired by a builder who only has their company's best interests at heart. As far-fetched as it sounds, it's happening, and you need to have someone on your side who's going to make sure you spot a convenience clause in a contract before you sign it. And by the way, if we sound like the right person for the job, check out our Let's Find Home questionnaire that you can find in the description section. Next up, I want to talk to you about the escalation clause rug pull. If you want to know how bad it is to have an escalation clause in a contract, you should know that even some new construction builders are warning buyers not to sign a contract with an escalation clause in it. One builder in Dallas, William Ryan Homes, shared an article about how some home builders are using an escalation clause, which means the contract price of your new home can change or escalate based on the builder's cost increases for materials. And if you didn't quite understand that, basically some contracts state that even though you have executed the contract with the agreement that you would purchase the home for X amount of dollars, the builders can raise that amount if their cost for materials increases. This is no subtle change either. WR Homes explains that home buyers who agree to an escalation clause are sometimes finding that when their closing occurs, the price of their home has increased by as much as tens of thousands of dollars. So not only are you outraged that your budget was thrown off, but you may not even qualify for the mortgage anymore. But okay, let's take a look at an example of an escalation clause so you can be sure to keep an eye out for it. We found one in Normandy Homes that states, in the event that there's a price increase in any construction materials in excess of 10% from the price of similar materials purchased by seller in approximately the same time frame, the excess charges may be passed through to purchaser. Want to hear what the sales consultant said when I asked about this clause? She responded by explaining that she'd been in the business for many years, and this clause was in most builder contracts. Well, the truth and the good news is it isn't actually all that common, but you need to be informed and know better when a sales consultant tells you not to worry about something like an escalation clause. So don't rush the process. Sales consultants are notorious about rushing the sale, telling you they only have one of this type of inventory home left, or only one of a certain style of lot left, or these special incentives end today. There is so much pressure, and they're excellent at it. And I know it can be hard when you find the perfect home or the perfect lot, okay, but you've gotta step back. I mean, we at Home in Dallas can only help you if you allow us the time to do so. And maybe that's what the sales consultants don't want. I mean, home builder contracts have a lot of predatory clauses that can really stop you in your tracks. But if you're feeling pressured, you may not have the time to read that fine print. So my advice is, no matter how much they pressure you, step back. Take the time to sit down with us and thoroughly review the contract. And it is possible you'll lose that house or that lot. And I know you don't want that, but there are thousands of new construction homes in Dallas, and you don't want to make a hasty decision and regret it later, okay? Because trust me, once you've paid the deposit, chances are you're not going to get it back. In fact, I made a whole separate video about builder tactics and how easy it is to lose your deposit. You can watch that video right here. In the meantime, Wendy out.